today's session, we shall discuss the topic called racism. Okay, so under the subtopic called casteism, casteism, which is very unique to India, right? Not found in any other part of the world. So, in relation to casteism, you have to know there is another very cruel practice which was practiced throughout the world. Of course, politically it is banned now, but still it does exist in the mindsets of the people. Okay, in the other countries of the world, indeed across the world. Okay, so caste system and racism share many parallels. There are many parallel roots, there are many parallel factors and aspects to it. Okay, so keeping that in mind, we need to have a bit of general awareness and knowledge about racism as a concept as such, right? It is another discriminatory practice amongst other discriminatory practices, right? Like caste system, class system, and communalism. Amongst all these evil practices, discriminatory practices, racism is one such practice. So, keeping this in mind, this little elaborate introduction in mind, we need to know the root causes of it, right? So, racism is something uh, which took place during and aftermath of colonial conquests in African continent especially. Okay, in African continents especially, when the white people, white conquerors from Europe happened to visit African land, and they found only the people with black skin color, right? So skin color is the basic determinant factor of the concept of race and the practice of racism. Okay, so they went and saw that these black people were so much unlike themselves, and their skin color, they are so very different. All of them are dark, all of them are black in their skin color. That's exactly where this evil concept, the demonic concept of segregating people on the basis of race, um, took birth in the minds of the white colonizers. Okay, it is the basic underlying truth about racism lies in human psyche, human mindset. That is, hating something which is exactly opposite of what you are. Okay, something which is not you, something which is not like yourself, something which is not part of you, something which is dead opposite, something which is completely different from how you are and what you are. You tend to hate those unfamiliar things, right? So we have this famous proverb, right? Unfamiliarity breeds contempt. Okay, so it's very similar to that. Something which you do not understand, something which is unfamiliar to you. Okay, either it elicits fear if you are in a subdued position, okay, or if you are in a powerful position, it elicits hatred. Okay, so this is the basic psychological cause or root behind racism. So the white people went on African land. They found that these people are completely opposite to their skin color. Okay, these colonizers were white, and they when they began to colonize, the colonized people were completely black, right? So initially, they turned them into their slaves. Later on, and along the side of practice of slavery, this practice of racism took place. And it so happened that in the later centuries and later decades, even after the countries were freed of slavery, and even after they begot freedom from colonial masters, colonial conquests, the practice of racism still was prevalent. Okay, it was that common derogatory practice, right, to call the Africans or the black people as Negroes. Today, it's a banned term. It's a completely banned term across the world. It's a punishable offense under the law if you call somebody as a Negro. It's a abusive term. It's a racist, abusive term. So, keeping that in mind, racism occupied a wide and varied and very large canon, and so many practices came to be the sub practices of racism. One amongst them was, the practice of lynching, right? And what is this lynching? Lynching is kind of practice where the either the complete black family or a black person is literally hanged from the trees in public, from a tree in public, and that person is mutilated and stoned to death. And people, the white people, actually derived pleasure from this practice of literally murdering and killing a person with the uttermost humiliation which was possible by the humans, right, and done to another human being, and the kind of atrocious practice which could which could be termed as the highest form of cruelty and gruesome atrocity towards another human being. There cannot be more humiliating atrocity than this, right, like lynching. So, apart from this, there were also practices like these black Africans, when they were physically very strong, very sturdy people. So, especially Americans, when they visited Africa, when they colonized African people, they saw very prospective human resource who could be brought to American and made who could be brought to America and could be made to work on American plantations. And they thought they could bank upon the physical um, strength, okay, physical sturdiness of these black people, and they began to import these people literally from African land. They could buy them like slaves and literally and forcefully bring them to American plantations to work upon it, right? And it's very ironical that the so called rich American nation or plantations, they are built upon the sweat, blood, and tears of so many black African people. Okay, and it's very cruel that the way these slaves were imported, the black people were got to America, they were brought through ships those days, right? They had to cross the oceans and they were brought through ships, and in those ships they were tied together in common chains, in single thick chains of iron. 10 to 12 slaves, dozen of them, would be commonly tied to a lengthy iron chain, right? So much so humiliating that irrespective of whether they were men or women, all of them were tied together in a common chain. If they had to even use the toilets, even if they had to take bath or eat, they had to do everything together one at a time, right? There was no respect of individual choices or individual orientation. Whether one is hungry or not, was supposed to eat when all other 11 members tied to that common chain um, used to eat, right? So what does it tell you? It is a complete denial of individuality. It is a complete denial of individual identity and respect to these black people, right? They were treated like animals, right? They were treated like some wild beasts, not even the domesticating animals. They were treated like wild beasts, okay? And they were kind of because few African tribes did have kind of customs, like hunting was their traditional profession. And they had their own tribal culture, which according to the white people looked like a savage, rugged and uncivilized way of life, okay? So these people, actually the black people, they were initially blackmailed that if they served white people, they would be given the white people's education, their clothing, their religion, okay? So some of the black people indeed bought these concepts, okay? Because they were brainwashed. Initially they were brainwashed. When the white people completely got the grip and control over the African land, then they began to use these physical abuses, right? And coming back to how they were brought on the ships, they were all tied in a single chain, and they had to all sleep together at one place, and they were tied like that days together, months together, okay? And some of them felt so humiliated and also physically so tortured that they happened to jump in the oceans and commit mass suicides, right? So 11 to 12 of them, whoever was tied together in that iron chain, they would decidedly come together and jump into ocean and commit suicides, not able to bear with humiliation and also physical torture, okay? And these people, when they happen to walk together in those chains tied on their hands and legs, they happen to made some kind of sound, which later was in a kind of paying tribute to these lost and dead slaves and the black people who were tortured by the white colonizers, as a kind of symbolic respect and homage and a tribute. Later on it was researched upon and imagined that these chains, the shackles with which they were tied together, they made some kind of sound, which later was termed as jazz music. It made that movement of moving together, it made a kind of music, okay, some sound. So that was later the origin and the uh, root concept behind today's African pop culture, pop music, very famously known as the jazz music, okay? So this is a bit elaborate introduction on the practice of racism as such, okay? Let us look into few more discriminatory practices as per your syllabus in the forthcoming sessions.